everyone, and welcome back to the Wisdom by Harry YouTube channel. My name is Harry.
And I'm Mary. We're so excited to have you here today for another fascinating episode.
Today, we're tackling something really serious, a developing situation in Yemen.
That's right. There are some very disturbing reports coming out about an incident involving a migrant detention center and potentially U.S. military action.
Yeah, it immediately brings up a lot of questions, frankly. So our goal today is to really try and unpack the context around this event for you.
We need to look at the bigger picture, the war in Yemen, the situation for migrants there, which is, well, incredibly dangerous, and what this alleged strike might mean.
Exactly. We've gathered various reports, different sources to try and piece together what's happening and, what the key takeaways are here.
And it's fascinating, isn't it, in a, well, deeply troubling way, how this one event just throws all these interconnected crises into sharp focus.
It's not just one military strike in isolation.
Not at all. It forces us to look at the realities of this long civil war, the desperate reasons people are migrating through Yemen, and the role international players have in this very volatile region.
Okay, let's get into the specifics of the incident itself. What do we actually know?
Well, the initial reports are coming from Houthi-affiliated media. They're alleging a U.S. airstrike hit a migrant detention center. This was in Sawada, which is a Houthi stronghold.
And they've given a date.
Yes, Monday, April 28th, 2025. The reported casualty figures are quite high. At least 68 African migrants supposedly killed and another 47 wounded.
68 killed. That's significant. And this facility, how many people were there?
The reports suggest around 115 detainees were being held there, primarily, it seems, from Ethiopia.
Now, has the U.S. military commented on this specific alleged strike?
Not directly on this particular incident, not immediately anyway.
Yeah.
But U.S. Central Command, CENTCOM, they have acknowledged conducting a lot of strikes recently.
A lot.
Over 800 strikes in Yemen just since mid-March. That's part of what they're calling Operation Rough Rider. They did say they're aware of claims of civilian casualties generally, and that they're conducting, I think the term was a battle damage assessment and inquiry.
Okay, so aware of claims, assessing, but no confirmation on this specific Sawada strike yet.
Right. Meanwhile, the Houthi media outlets, they've released some pretty graphic footage. It shows bodies, injured people at the site.
And accounts from survivors, too.
Yes, some accounts seem to suggest people were asleep when the strike happened, which, if true, is just horrifying.
Understandably, the Houthi authorities have reacted strongly.
Very strongly. They're calling it a deliberate bombing, a war crime, strong condemnation.
And international organizations, are they weighing in?
They are. The UN's migration agency, the IOM, expressed sadness over the reports. They called for civilians to be protected, which is, standard but crucial. The ICRC, the Red Cross, also reported they were providing support on the ground.
Okay, so the international community is responding, but you mentioned something earlier about this specific location.
Yeah.
This isn't the first time this facility has been hit, is it?
That's a really disturbing detail, yes. Reports indicate that the location matches a migrant center that was hit by a Saudi-led coalition airstrike back in January 2022.
January 2022. And that was also deadly.
Extremely. Reports from that time suggested, I believe, around 66 people were killed in that strike. So the fact that this facility, potentially the same facility, known to house migrants, was hit again, well, it raises serious questions.
Questions about whether its status as a migrant center was known, right?
Yeah.
And the implications of targeting it, deliberately or accidentally.
Exactly. It really highlights just how vulnerable these people are. They're caught quite literally in the crossfire of a conflict they have nothing to do with, often in detention.
Let's zoom out a bit then. Why are so many migrants in Yemen in the first place? It's a country in the midst of a brutal war.
It is. But Yemen lies on a major migration path, what's known as the Eastern Route. People, mostly from the Horn of Africa, think Ethiopia, Somalia, primarily are trying to reach Saudi Arabia or other Gulf countries for work.
And this route takes them through Yemen.
Yes, they undertake this incredibly perilous journey, first crossing the Red Sea or the Gulf of Aden, often in rickety boats, and then they have to travel overland through Yemen, through the war zone.
It sounds nightmarish. And yet, you said numbers are increasing. That seems counterintuitive.
It does, doesn't it? But it speaks volumes about the sheer desperation in their home countries. We hear about crippling economic hardship in Ethiopia, ongoing political instability, the drought situation, which is affecting the whole Horn of Africa.
And Somalia too, right. Long history of conflict, economic problems, drought.
Precisely. These push factors are so intense that people are willing to risk this incredibly dangerous journey. Despite the war in Yemen, over 60,000 migrants arrived there in 2024 alone. That's a huge number.
60,000 in 1 year.
Yeah.
And they arrive with nothing.
Often, yes. No resources, no support network, which makes them incredibly vulnerable.
Vulnerable to what exactly?
Yeah.
Beyond the risks of the war itself.
Well, the reports on the human rights situation are grim. Migrants face detention in, frankly, inhumane conditions. There's exploitation, terrible abuse by traffickers and smugglers who control parts of the route.
We hear awful stories.
Yeah.
Forced transfers, being abandoned.
Yes, even reports of smugglers forcing people off boats into the sea if they're intercepted. And then trying to cross the border into Saudi Arabia carries its own risks. There have been reports, including from human rights groups, alleging killings by Saudi border guards. It's danger piled on danger.
And detention isn't just by one side?
No, migrants are often detained by both Houthi forces and forces loyal to the internationally recognized government. It seems attitudes have hardened compared to the past, when maybe there was a slightly more welcoming stance, particularly towards Somalis fleeing conflict.
It just paints a picture of utter vulnerability, trapped between the dangers back home and the dangers of the journey and the destination.
Absolutely. Now let's maybe quickly recap the wider Yemen conflict itself, because that's the essential backdrop here.
Good idea. So remind us, how did this all start?
Okay, so the current civil war really kicked off in 2014. That's when the Houthi movement, insurgents from the north, took control of the capital, Samana, and ousted the internationally recognized government.
And that led to international intervention.
Yes, in 2015, a coalition led by Saudi Arabia intervened, aiming to restore the government. The U.S. initially provided support, logistical, intelligence support to that coalition.
And where are things now with that fight? The Houthi-Saudi fight?
The direct fighting between the Houthis and the Saudi coalition has largely died down. There have been truces, negotiations, though nothing permanently resolved. But this situation shifted again recently, didn't it?
With the Red Sea attacks.
Exactly. The Houthis started attacking commercial shipping in the Red Sea, saying it's in response to the Israel-Hamas war, in solidarity with Palestinians. That's brought renewed international military focus, particularly from the US and UK.
And throughout all this, the humanitarian situation?
Has been catastrophic, consistently called the world's worst humanitarian crisis. Millions needing aid, facing starvation, displaced from their homes, just immense suffering for ordinary Yemenists.
And U.S. involvement, how has that changed over the years? You mentioned initial support for the coalition.
Right. That support was later scaled back, particularly under the Biden administration. The focus shifted more towards counterterrorism, specifically against AQAP, Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula, which has a presence in Yemen.
But now, with the Red Sea attacks,
the U.S. redesignated the Houthis as a terrorist organization, and they launched Operation Rough Rider, these intensified airstrikes like the 800+ we mentioned.
and the stated goal of Rough Rider.
Officially, it's about restoring freedom of navigation in the Red Sea and reestablishing American deterrence in the region, protecting international shipping lanes.
But these strikes aren't just happening at sea. We've seen strikes inside Yemen.
Definitely. Like the one on the fuel terminal earlier in April, which reportedly killed over 70 people. And now this alleged strike on the Migrant Center. It shows the campaign is hitting targets on land within Houthi-controlled areas.
Which brings us back to the political side of things. The Houthis link their Red Sea actions to Gaza.
Yes, that's their stated motivation. Solidarity with Palestinians. And interestingly, after this alleged U.S. strike on the Migrant Center, the Houthis claim they retaliated by targeting a U.S. aircraft carrier. Now, whether that claim is accurate is another question, but it shows their intent to link these events.
It highlights that dangerous cycle, doesn't it? Action and reaction, potentially escalating things.
Absolutely. And you can't forget the wider regional context. Yemen has long been seen, partly at least, as a proxy conflict, particularly involving Iran, which is seen as backing the Houthis, and Saudi Arabia on the other side. It's incredibly complex.
So, wrapping this up, we started with this specific tragic incident at the Migrant Detention Center.
Yes, a truly horrific event if the reports are accurate.
But it's clearly not just about that single event. It connects so many threads.
It really does. You've got the terrible vulnerability of migrants caught in this situation. You've got the dynamics of the Yemeni civil war itself, which hasn't ended. You've got these regional power plays happening. And then you have the escalating international military action, specifically the U.S. strikes.
It forces you, doesn't it, to think about all those layers interacting. The internal Yemeni situation, the regional struggles, the international involvement.
And right at the bottom of it all, the human cost, especially for people who are already fleeing danger and seeking refuge, only to be caught in yet another conflict.
So, a final thought maybe for you listening. Consider what this incident tells us about interventions in these incredibly complex conflict zones. What does it say about protecting very vulnerable groups like migrants who get caught in the crossfire?
Yeah, it raises profound questions about responsibility, about the unintended consequences of military action, and about how we address the root causes that force people to make these desperate journeys in the first place. Lots to think about regarding migration, human rights, and, well, security across the entire region.